Lingua Brutalica is a podcast that uses ethnographic interviews to study language use in the extreme metal community. We are studying a music scene known for its love of themes and topics generally considered offensive, and it is likely that some episodes will touch on topics or opinions some listeners may find tasteless or ethically problematic. Ethnographic researchers aim to adopt the interviewee's point of view so that we can draw out and study the attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are important to them. We want to make it clear that in presenting these conversations here, we do not endorse any of their content. Our aim is to explore the thought processes behind language use in this long-running, international, and yet understudied scene. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Lingua Brutalica with me, Jess Crook, and my co-host, Wes Robertson.
Hello.
Today we have another podcast first by talking to the band O, who are the first band we've interviewed based in China. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
So we wanted to start off, as we always do, by asking the bands that we interviewed to describe their music for people who haven't heard it before. So how would you describe O's music?
The music of O breaks a lot of conventions. Rhythmically and melodically, there's definitely a degree of difficulty inherent in the music, just performing it. But it has its own, voice. It's definitely different, I think, in the metal kind of circles or, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it's challenging. And, we hope the music will, reach people, and we hope it resonates. Yeah, but it's definitely, what basically, she's saying it's unique,
In a number of interviews or reviews of your music, the band has been described as progressive metal. Is that a term you align with, or do you find it limiting in some ways?
Fine, okay. 然后还有就是我觉得我
The music is, I think the term progressive metal is, she's saying it's correct. And also, but, it could also be considered rock. It could be considered, somewhat math rock-ish. But, we hope the music isn't, so narrowly defined as a certain thing. I think it's a little bit open to interpretation. It's not completely, like we just said, it's pretty unique. So, it may not be totally, we don't want to be boxed in by any particular genre, in other words. But yeah, I mean, progressive metal is a pretty broad genre. So, I think it leaves a lot of room for, for different forms of expression. So yeah, the music is definitely unique, but I think, if in a broad progressive metal, we're cool with that.
And so when did you first get into metal music, and what attracted you to the style to begin with?
Well, maybe I'll answer this first because I, my beginnings were with metal music. What brought me to music was heavy music. I remember my parents bought me when I was in 5th grade, And Justice for All, the CD, and that was it. And I was hooked. And so my musical background, the roots of it are based in heavy music, but over the years you get turned on to different things. And of course you grow and you expand and, you expand your horizons and check out different genres, and slowly but surely, you have all kinds of different influences. So I think, the music of always kind of a reflection of that in some ways, because there are a lot, the roots of it are I think are based in heavy music, but yeah, there's a lot of other influences, of course, from jazz or, anything. It's pretty eclectic.
Your parents bought you Justice for All?
Yeah, for Christmas in 1990. That's going to give away my age, I guess. But yeah, I was in 5th grade. It was like, I don't even know what year that was, 1992 or something. I don't remember. But it was it was a long
Oh.
time ago, and you know, that changed my life. You know, I remember I couldn't stop listening to it, you know, like I was sitting in class all day and the only thing in my brain was just that music, you know, and I couldn't wait for the bell to ring, and I just run home and I just sit in front of the CD player and just listen to it all, you know. I probably wasn't doing much homework or anything at the time as a result of it, but yeah, that kind of changed my life. And in Lynn's case, she actually really never listened to like metal. You know, she definitely listens to rock, but she actually comes from more of like a pop background. But when I found her, she had sent some demos and they were kind of more rock based, and I was really drawn to the fact that she had a very versatile voice and very malleable, you know, the way she can shape it and contours and dynamics, you know, especially the more like I wanted power in it, you know, but not screaming. Like, I mean, I love a lot of music I love that has screaming, but I wanted, you know, we wanted like melody to be the focal point. So, but those melodies delivered in, you know, in times like with a certain degree of power, and her voice definitely is capable of that, you know, bringing like rasp and, you know, but there's still like a definite pitch in it, you know, it's not not just complete, you know, screaming, which is cool too, but it wasn't quite the vibe we were going for.
So Lynn, was it difficult to write lyrics for a genre that you weren't that familiar with at first?
首先我们去做这张专辑的时候，咱们没有去定义它是什
She
么。
basically said when we started making this album, we never said, oh, we're gonna make a progressive metal album. You know, we were kind of just following our intuition and just trying to make the most honest music possible. So, you know, there was never any deliberate intention to have this music mold into a certain genre. It just kind of came out organically. So for her to write the lyrics, she just said it was very natural, actually. Even though it was in like, you know, a so-called heavy music, you know, genre, but no, she had no problem with that. Came out very naturally.
So is your writing process, do you think, influenced by pop and rock more than metal lyrics?
更可能是一个作文或者是一个诗吧。我是在写像
In terms of her lyrics, it's not so much a musical style. It's her approach is more from like a poetic sense, or, you know, like a composition, like a yeah, more of a poetry.
诗。
Yeah. So it wasn't intentional. Oh, you know, I want to make lyrics that are rock, you know, or metal. It was just, you know, it was just like writing poetry, basically.
And so since you've produced this album, have you like started to listen to any more metal music? And I suppose, has that then influenced the way you think about metal music?
做完这个音乐之后，哦，我听那个梦剧院。
Yeah, basically, so ever since, you know, she basically said since we finished this record, she obviously became, because she didn't have too much background with so-called heavy music before this, but, you know, since becoming signed to Inside Out Music, she was obviously very curious, like other bands that are on it. So she started checking it out. She just mentioned, you know, she's been listening to Dream Theater, and Devin Townsend, Devin Townsend music was actually quite an influence in a lot of ways for the making of this record. Just, you know, in many respects.
Sure.
So yes, since making the record, yeah, she started to check out, you know, more progressive bands to kind of give more ideas and, you know, have a larger scope of you know, sensibility and stuff like that.
Are those ideas mainly musical, or is she also interested in the lyrics being used?
就是看他们整体这个力量 power， 然后还有他们
When she's checking out, since she started checking out these bands she hadn't listened to before, she's, you know, it's more of just a pure feeling. Like, she's not approaching it from a technical standpoint, you know, and the lyrics, obviously, she just said the lyrics, she hasn't really paid too much attention to the. I mean, she didn't mention this, but there could be, you know, a language barrier as well. Of course, being that it's all in those lyrics are all in English, but she's more actually interested in seeing a lot of these bands, like their live performance, you know, the feeling that they give out, you know, from live performance, which is something we obviously plan on doing in the near future. So yeah, it's more her approach to listening to these different kinds of bands that she hadn't previously listened to is more from just a pure emotional standpoint and feeling like the energy and power from these bands, especially from the live performance.
So also with the question of wanting to write kind of from a poetic perspective, is that something that she decided on once hearing your music, or is that just the way of writing lyrics that she finds most appealing?
从这个曲子的名字，比如说咱们这首是山 ，OK， 那我就以山。
Actually, Lynn originally just actually liked writing poetry, so it actually came very naturally. She comes from a background of just having this interest. So yeah, it was more of just it was almost like the same thing. She didn't regard it as like, okay, well, now I'm writing lyrics for music. It was just, well, I always had this interest and I've been writing poetry for a long time. So it was just, you know, it was just like writing poetry. And she just mentioned she used the song title names as a springboard in some cases for the content of lyrics. For example, the song Mountain. Well, you know, the song Mountain, it might not be, the mountain itself is obviously probably a symbol for other things. But yeah, she used the song titles as a springboard for the lyrical content as well.
I mean, a question that we often ask is, you know, what makes good or bad lyrics, right? And usually we position this in the context of, you know, what makes good and bad metal lyrics. But given that Lynn's coming from a predominantly non-metal background, I guess we could ask a kind of broader question about, you know, what she thinks makes for good lyrics or bad lyrics.
并不是我要是因为这个歌是这样的题材我就要写这样的东西。首先必须得触动我。
For her, it's simply just authenticity. And the words that you read, you know, in terms of lyrics, do they touch you in a certain way? You know, that's basically how she, you know, feels about lyrics. If they're, you know, good or bad, you know, if you want to make yeah. So it's basically just authenticity and how it touches her, how she feels when she reads the lyrics.
Yes.
This is a really hard question, but how do you determine what's authentic?
你要发自内心的要去相信它的存在，感受它，然后
authenticity for her means you must have a genuine belief, like a faith in what it is that you're trying to express. You know, whatever's in your heart, you really have to believe in it 100%. You know, it has to be, you know, there has to be a faith behind it. You know, you believe in it, and then, you know, then it's authentic.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because a lot of research on metal has suggested that a lot of lyricists tend to take a lot of distance from their lyrics. So saying that it's just entertainment, it's not necessarily meaningful or, you know, deep in any way. So it sounds like Lynn's position is kind of the opposite, right?
对，我想是写给我因为是我唱，我肯定要唱出有内涵的东西。我不能唱，如果那样的话，那
yeah, she definitely doesn't. He's not coming from that perspective, and you know, she just said again, like, you know, authenticity. It has to. The lyrics she's singing, she has to believe in it. You know, otherwise, why not just sing? You could just sing random syllables and vowels and stuff. You don't need. You know, so you know a certain kind of power comes from the faith in what it is you're singing. So that's really important to her. So, you know, when she writes lyrics, they have to be genuine and authentic and come, you know, they have to come from a place of, you know, you have faith in it. You know, you believe in what it is that you're writing.
Then do you pay any attention to what other metal bands in China are doing at all? Does their lyrical practices interest you in any way, or is it something that you don't feel is worth really paying attention to or kind of responding to?
有，但是我不记得了。主要是我是看，因为咱们的不一样，咱们的格式包括什么都不一样。
Actually, in terms of, because Lynn doesn't really come from in China, it doesn't come from this background of music. So honestly, you know, China domestically, like other bands that fit into the heavy music genre, she hasn't really, you know, paid too much attention to. I mean, I think that's going to probably change now that we're kind of just getting things going here. I'm sure, you know, in the near future, we'll probably be playing, you know, festivals or things like that where there are other heavy bands here, which there are quite a few in China. But yeah, no, the presently the short answer is she hasn't really been paying, you know, is not very aware of, you know, other metal bands here in China.
So I guess then to talk about the band's lyrics more specifically, our first question is just broadly, why did you decide to write the lyrics in Chinese?
我是中国人啊，你让我写，那我的母语是普中国人，是吧？ I'm Chinese， 所以我中文写的比较熟，所以我用中文。
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer to that is, you know, she's Chinese. It's her mother language, so it's just the natural thing, you know. And we are Chinese. Like I'm a foreigner here, but you know, I'm the only foreigner in the band. You know, I've been here over 10 years now, so it kind of feels like home in many ways. But yeah, you know, I think you know, it's her mother tongue, so it's going to be, like she mentioned, it's going to be the most authentic, you know. She's going to have the best way to deliver the lyrics authentically if it's coming from her own mother language. Well, so yeah,
to give some background to that question, so it sounds maybe a little less silly, I've personally done some research on the metal scene in Japan, and I'd say 75 to 90% of the bands there sing in English, even though it's not their mother language, and many of them don't speak English at all, despite writing all their lyrics in English and singing in English. And they've mentioned many times that they felt, especially in the past, but still now too, like a pressure to sing in English, especially when they want to have an international reach. Is that not do those considerations not exist here? Is there no like English pressure or no even feel that, oh, okay, this is metal, so I have to sing in English? Is that like not extant in for your band?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll answer this one because I'm kind of the foreigner here, and I think for us, being that we're a Chinese, but we honestly didn't feel any pressure. And just this is just me personally speaking right now. Honestly, I'm kind of sick of the English language. You know,
follow you.
Because like, I mean, it's obvious it's the dominant language of the world. You know, it is the world language. You know, you go anywhere, and if people, you know, your go-to language is going to be English. You know, if you're if you're with a group of people from different nationalities, the go-to language is English for communication, and that's probably not going to change. You know, that's just the way it is, and that's cool. You know, the world has a way to communicate. You know, for those that speak it, you know, there's a way to communicate easily. But this is just me personally speaking. Right? I mean, look, like all pop culture, so many, you know, facets of music and pop music. I mean, a great majority, like you just mentioned, like there's even in Europe, there's a lot of great bands that I love that aren't English speaking, native English speakers, but still, like you said, their lyrics are still in English, you know, and it's cool, but like, I'm just kind of getting tired of it. Like the syntax and the composition of lyrics created in the English language, I feel like it's starting to get burnt out a little bit, you know, like probably because how many ways you're going to say the same fucking thing over and over, you know, this, I know this sounds very cynical, and I'm actually, what I'm saying, like, I'm not even 100% on board with what I'm saying right now, but it's just like, it's a little bit in there in my subconscious. Like, kind of a little bit tired of it. You know, I think when I hear, even just off topic, I remember watching a great Netflix TV series called Dark, and it's a German TV series. I don't know if you had seen it. It's really great.
Yeah.
But honestly, one of my favorite, what was so refreshing, obviously the story is amazing and it's really well done. But even besides that, one of the things that was so appealing to me was just hearing the whole thing in a different language. You know, obviously I was looking at English subtitles, but there was something about it that was just so refreshing. You know, so that's just a personal thing. But yeah, I mean, honestly, we couldn't give a fuck about appealing to the international standards of, you know, you need to have your music in English language in order for, and honestly, the reception has been pretty cool. Like we've been checking out YouTube and the comments and stuff, and people seem pretty like supportive of it, you know, which is great. You know, people seem very positive about it. I haven't seen any comments like saying, oh, you know, asking why it's not in English or anything like that. You know, and I'm hoping, you know, it'll resonate with you. And honestly, like even when I was, especially when I was a kid, I remember like even Metallica, for example, going back to and Justice for All. Honestly, when I was in 5th grade, I couldn't even understand what James Hetfield was singing half the time. You know what I mean? Even though it was all in English. But I kind of like that, because sometimes my brain would interpret the lyrics differently than, you know, if I looked in the booklet, then of course I could see exactly what he's singing. But sometimes my brain would interpret the lyrics differently. So it's like almost like you have your own personal connection to the song, like what you think he's singing, but he actually might be singing something else, which is something interesting. And obviously this music, like, you know, if you're not a native Chinese speaker, and even if you are a native Chinese speaker, it might still be difficult, which I've read some comments, you know, I've seen some comments like, oh, I'm Chinese, but I still can't make out half of what she's singing. But I think that's kind of cool, because I don't, that again, this is just me speaking personally. I like leaving a little bit of mystery in the music. And even when I'm listening to music, you know, I don't feel the need to know every little detail about everything. You know, I like leaving things kind of left to the open. Like what is it? You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to know. And it's like the same thing with band. Oh, like, you know, you could call it progressive metal. I think that's correct and it's cool. But the other side of it is like, I almost don't want to know what it is. You know what I mean? I don't want to I want to kind of leave it. I want it to be kind of a mystery to myself as to what it is. And kind of just let it unfold naturally. And I think the lyrics are definitely, you know, sung in Chinese. I think are a reflection of that, you know. And Inside Out, the label was super cool and supportive, and never ever, you know, there was never any hint of, oh, can you guys try to write a song in English, you know, or anything. You know, they were super cool about it. And, you know, so yeah, I mean, and even if there was pressure, we wouldn't care. You know what I mean? Like this is who we are. And, you know, if it affects record sales in a negative way because we're not singing, you know, then so be it. What can you do? You know.
Something else that we noticed though, when we looked at the lyrics in your lyric books though, was that although, yeah, certainly the lyrics are written in Chinese characters, there's also lyrics printed in pinyin. Is there a reason that you've done both, the characters and pinyin?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just answer this one again. Being, you know, because this question would be from a foreigner standpoint, like why? It just simply we could have put an English translation, and the reason why we didn't was because at the very least, if you couldn't, because Chinese written language is pictorial, it's a character base, it's not like an alphabet. But like you just mentioned, pinyin is basically the romanization of Chinese. So even if you can't read the characters, you can kind of have a pretty decent approximation of what the pronunciation of those characters are. Pinyin. So the pinyin, that's basically just giving somebody who doesn't understand Chinese, at least when you're listening, you maybe can follow the pinyin. I don't know if you guys made the attempt or not, but maybe, you know, you can look at the pinyin and see, you know, approximately how that pronunciation is. You So that was a deliberate choice instead of just the English translation, because if you put the English translation, then you have no way, there's no way you're going to have any way to, if you wanted to kind of sing along to it or, whatever, then you have no way to at least attempt at the pronunciation. But the English translations were all, we put them all on our Facebook and Instagram page. We made like a little image of every song with the Chinese and the English translation. So, the English translation is out there. So that was the reasoning behind, including the pinyin instead of English.
Interesting. Yeah, just because it's not something we've seen before. I've interviewed a lot of bands from Taiwan, but they've written just in characters, and then they've had English versions of the lyrics, but not translations per se. But this is the first time we've seen pinyin. So yeah, we thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, that's the reasoning behind it, just to give non-Chinese speaking people a chance to at least be able to approximate pronunciation.
Right.
Well, to move into the lyrics themselves, one thing we kind of noticed is that a lot of lyrics throughout the album seem to capture kind of a balance of opposing forces or feelings. For instance, there's a pair of songs, Dark and Light, and there's also songs like Travel, which seem to describe kind of existential dread, as in lyrics like Look Inwards to Hopelessness Inside in the English translation, which contrast with songs like Euphoria, which have lines like This fleeting life is like a dream. When Lynn was writing the lyrics, was there an intent to create contrasts between songs throughout the album?
当时写的时候，因为我觉得无论是黑暗的还是光明的。
Yeah, I think there's definitely some conscious, approach to like kind of opposing forces. She was just mentioning, for example, the last two songs of the album, Dark and Light. Obviously, it's a very obvious pair of songs where it's kind of trying to express kind of polar opposites of something. But when she's writing these lyrics, she said that everything is kind of sourcing from some kind of power. Like she said, like the forces, darkness, like it has its own power, and light is like the opposite, but yet it has its own power. So she's trying to channel all these lyrics that she's writing. She's trying to channel like a certain energy, like a certain power, and there's definitely this dynamicism in the lyrics, like you just mentioned, like these opposing forces. So yeah, there's definitely was some conscious approach to that concept.
What kind of motivated that desire to have these contrasting approaches throughout the album? Was there some kind of something that spawned that idea, or was it some kind of effect that she was aiming for in the album as a whole?
我没有想刻意出效果，我就是发自内心的就想写一些东西。
Yeah, basically, it wasn't, she wasn't writing those lyrics in that way with the intent of a certain kind of outcome or effect. It was really like she mentioned before, it's just came out naturally, just kind of going with the flow of how the music was kind of unfolding. This music, like we kind of had to be careful to kind of get out of our own way sometimes, you know what I mean? Because you can kind of get in your own way, and so you have to find a balance. And yeah, when she's writing lyrics, it's just kind of trying to, while you're in the midst of creating, you want to channel the most honest energy, positive energy you can in the moment, so there wasn't a deliberate intention to do anything, in terms of lyrics as well, this concept of like opposing forces or contrast. But yeah, the album, for me personally, I will say that musically, because I was more involved with the musical composition aspect of it, contrast and dynamics were something I was really interested in and wanted to make, kind of an important aspect of the music, ebb and flow, and try to keep it dynamically interesting. And I think Lynn, like her lyrics, kind of just naturally went with that. So yeah.
So talking of your song titles, one of the patterns that we noticed was that all of your song titles are only a single word, or rather character in length. Did you actively decide to just use like a single word character for all of your song titles, or was this again something that was more natural?
That was, I will say, I could say with certainty that was kind of a intentional thing. In the beginning it wasn't, but then we found out that it turned out a lot of these songs were just one word for a title, and then it was just kind of like, well, let's keep that going. Why change it? Let's just make every album title just one word. The future albums won't be like that, you know what I mean? So it was a little bit of an intentional thing.
你写的名字，我写的曲，我是根据你的名字写的。
Yeah, it was pretty much intentional.
What's the effect of that, do you think?
因为一个字就只能写一篇，你一个字我可以写好多篇。
Yeah, it's actually interesting. She said, well, first of all, it's kind of cool. But obviously more than that, in Chinese, one of the big differences between Chinese and a lot of Western languages is that a single character can actually it's a single character. A character in Chinese is just one syllable. It represents just one syllable, and a single syllable or a single character can actually encompass so much meaning and interpretation. So in having like every song just be one single character, it actually left a lot of room for her lyrically to have more leeway and room to compose lyrics, which she felt was kind of nice. If you just have one character, it really leaves a lot of open room for interpretation and a lot of room for her expressiveness as a lyricist.
And is that the same for listeners as well? Like, assuming that they can read the Chinese characters, like if they read them, is the intention then to like allow them the same freedom to interpret it, in a multitude of ways?
他们的感受可能，如果是对于我个人来说，我觉得，如果是我的话
，well, just like as you both discovered, it might just simply be, oh, every song is just a single word, and that's it.
Well, this question, I don't know if this is for actually you maybe, or for both of you, but especially because you mentioned, being tired of English and stuff like that. When we looked at these single word titles, we did kind of notice it's obviously a contrast to something you see often in metal, right? Like you mentioned Justice for All, but lengthy song or album titles, What a Horrible Night to Have a Curse. But the single words, rather, you see a lot of, huge, lengthy song names. Is the use of a single word here in any way kind of like a little bit of a middle finger to that kind of expectation or practice, or was that not a consideration at all?
No, I could say with a 100% certainty that was definitely no, that never even crossed our minds. I mean, I haven't even thought about it until you just mentioned the question. So no, I mean, look, we have no interest in giving the middle finger to anyone. It's not what the music is about. It's just being in our most, honest attempt to just be authentic and, and just write music from the heart, lyrically and musically and whatnot, So yeah, there's definitely none of that going on. There's enough animosity in the world right now. I feel like there's no need to add to any of it.
That's very fair. So talking further about characters, we did notice that most, if not all, of your track titles and song lyrics, if we're not mistaken, are written in traditional Chinese characters rather than simplified. So for example, the song Ghost, Lin, is written in the traditional character in place of the more simplified form. So we're just wondering what was the motivation behind this decision to write in the traditional rather than simplified?
对，就我觉得应该也是更酷一点，因为繁体字看起来就是。
Yeah, that's a simple thing. I mean, a lot even you know in China the official written language is the simplified, but still a lot of you know when you're it's just a common thing, you know, when it has a more of a literary. There's definitely there's an aesthetic component to it. You know, the traditional characters are still used in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and a lot of Chinese communities outside of mainland China, I think, predominantly use the traditional characters. You know, if you go to restaurants, the menu will be in traditional characters. And even here in the mainland, a lot of restaurants, like the sign outside the restaurant might have traditional characters. It just kind of evokes like it's got a vibe to it. And there's definitely an aesthetic component to it. There's kind of a beauty to it. The simplified characters, I think, were, and this is me just speaking, with a lack of a lot of historical knowledge, of course, but I think it was more of a very practical attempt to reduce illiteracy, because it even for Chinese, like, writing characters, there's a learning curve to that. It's not like they're born and they can just start writing these characters. It's like it's a long process. You know what I mean? And as a foreigner who spent quite a time, like, practicing writing and stuff. I mean, even Chinese themselves here, because everybody now is typing on the phone all the time. Even a lot of Chinese, like, if you ask them to write characters, they might have to think for a second, because nobody spends time actually with a pen in hand and writing stuff anymore. I mean, even when I try to write English, it's like my hand starts shaking, because I'm like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's like it feels like exhausting, just on the fine motor muscles in your fingers, because you don't do it anymore. But yeah, sorry, we're kind of going all over the place here with this very simple answer to the question. But yeah, no, it's just an aesthetic thing, and it just evokes a vibe, and it's cool.
I mean, to be overly blunt, do traditional characters feel more metal than simplified characters?
I think so. I think so. It's like fucking Latin, like it's got like, come on, it's metal. It's metal as hell. You know what I mean? For whatever reason.
Well, that's literally what we were going to ask.
Yeah.
Like, we were actually going to ask, like, because, yeah, as you know, there's a lot of English medium metal lyrics that are written in like very archaic forms of the language to make them, the lyrics feel older. There's a lot of like thee, thou, Latin expression. Right. Is it the same vibe? Like, when you use the traditional characters?
That's interesting. It might not be. I might not be the qualified one to answer that, because I'm not a native Chinese.
我觉得不一样，不是你虽然用繁体字，但是你虽然用繁体字，但它还是那个字的原型。如果你是美国人，你用了那个。
It's not really the case with this, because actually the traditional characters and the simplified characters are not that far off from one another, and in fact the sound, the pronunciation is exactly the same.
Sure.
And the meaning is exactly the same. So it's not like, in the English language, everything is like I don't know what the linguistic term, morphological, like, we can change the words into different ways, like you just said, thou or the, these kinds of things. But in Chinese, the reason why the characters, sorry, this is going off topic, but it is interesting, because originally China, it's a huge place, and to this day there's still thousands of dialects all over the country. And so just from a practical standpoint, the way to unify communication, to make communication easier, was just to have the characters means the same no matter what language you're in. So actually, I can't speak Cantonese, but if I'm watching like the news or something and it's a Cantonese speaker, if they have the characters underneath it, I can pretty much understand everything because it's the same characters. You know, if I read a newspaper in Hong Kong, I would pretty much understand everything because it's all the same characters. So sorry, this is completely off topic.
No, it's on topic.
No, it's totally on topic because I mean that's the difference, right? It's like Latin expressions like thee, thou, that's not in circulation like in English speaking context today, whereas Chinese traditional characters are.
Exactly. It's the same, then they have the same meaning, you know, and the sound is the same. It's just the characters themselves are more, it's a little more complex. Actually, the Chinese translation of what we call simplified and traditional, what they call it is the traditional, they call it fan ti zi, which actually means like complex. And jian ti zi like actually just means like the English simplified. So yeah.
What about the use of characters that are obscure though? Because there are songs like Farewell, which Kui, and Prejudice, which I messaged you about that I thought was a radical. Because those are not just traditional, those are actually just really, really rare characters, right? What's the motivation in using characters that maybe some Chinese speakers can't even read?
一般来说，这种字不经常出现，很少出现。魁，首先说魁吧，魁的曲子不是张晶写的。
So for example, the song Farewell, that character, which is pronounced Kui, is like is basically just like some kind of mythological monster or like a mythological something. And that simply was just because the song was called, actually the original title of that song was Imperfect Farewell. Zhang Jing, the guitar player, that's his composition. But going, like you had mentioned before, going with the concept of trying to keep every title to a single word, you know, he was cool with just calling it Farewell. But then when Lynn was writing the lyrics for Kui, for Farewell, she asked Jing like, oh, well, what's the title of this tune? And he told her, you know, he sent that character Kui, you know, and at the time she didn't know what it meant, but you know, she had to deal with it. She had to deal with it and interpret it, you know, as you know, she could do to the best of her abilities. And the other song which you had mentioned, which is kind of cool, that, you know, I remember when you sent me that message, I was impressed. You know, you took the time to look up the character, and you probably couldn't find much information about it because it's a pretty obscure one. And that's also Zhi, that the pronunciation of that character Zhi is also like kind of a mythological. 是有六只脚的那个吗？还是那个是魁？
魁是那个。
那Zhi呢是什么东西？
志我不是志，我写的不是志，就是未来，就是地球上人类消失。
Like for example, Prejudice and the character Zhi are almost, you know, you can extrapolate and try to make some connection, but they're pretty distant. And the
是
the direct meaning of
志是没有脚的虫子。
it's kind of like a monster. Yeah, that's the character.
Yeah.
It's basically a footless kind of like a worm or like a like an insect. You know, it's what do they call that? Like a worm. You know, they don't have feet. But the lyrics, if you read it, it's, you know, I don't know how you would extrapolate the character. And again, this was Jing's immediate response. Like when she asked him, well, what should we call Prejudice? You know, his English title was Prejudice, and well, what about the Chinese character? And that's what he sent, you know, and it was his composition. So, you know, we wanted to respect, you know, what he wanted to call the tune. So, so she just had to deal with it, you know. But I think from my understanding of the lyrics, there doesn't seem to be a direct connection to the content of the lyrics and the character in and of itself.
这个里面还有决绝的意思，
决绝
就决绝。为什么这样呢？就是当时写的时候问张晶，你想表达。
Yeah, so for that tune, for Prejudice, when Jing had sent this character to her and said this is the name of the tune, you know, he never said, oh, the lyrics need to be about what this character means at face value. You know what I mean? So she kind of she interpreted it, and that's how it went down.
Right. Because we were going to ask like about some of the like connections between the English titles and the Chinese titles, because we did notice that some of the Chinese titles are quite different to the English ones. So in that sense, they're not necessarily attempts at translation or anything like that then, right?
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know why he likes selecting obscure characters for obscure mythological animals as song titles? Because he's done it twice now, right? He has just twice in his messages.
I don't know. Let me ask Lynn.
That's a very nice question.
你知道原因吗？
我觉得哈，据我对他的了解，我觉得是他想象特别丰富。
So yes, she think, and we're just guessing here because we can't speak for Jing exactly, why, but she guesses it's probably because he wanted to pick two characters that a lot of people don't know, just for the, it's got a mysteriousness to it, and it's just different, even, and it's kind of cool. You guys, looked up the characters, and you picked out these two characters of the tunes, and they are, aside from the rest, I mean, like Mountain Shine, that's like you see that character everywhere, and it's a very easy character to write, but then there's these two like weird looking, and they look kind of strange. So we guess Jing just wanted to have something that would, it's just different, and you probably look at it and you're like, what the hell is that? Kind of gives you might make you stop and think for a second.
Another question about characters, and I'm gonna share my screen for this because there's no way it'll make any sense unless I show what's going on here. So hopefully this makes sense for people listening too. But we noticed that in a lot of the lyrics that Lynn writes, there's like repetitions of characters throughout the song. Like, apologies if my understanding of the character's meaning is wrong. I'm coming from knowing them from Japanese. So here you have open used 3 times as the second character in a line. Here you have like none and stop. And then this techie, I believe in Chinese, this is a possessive, repeated 4 and 3. And then it comes up again here. In this song, you have, this is like signage. So probably around there, but 1, 2, 3, 4 on the first line. Then this pair of characters is repeated 4 times here and then comes back here. And then these ones, which this isn't in Japanese and this is like put inside, are repeated here and then once again at the end. On this song, I have no idea what this one is, but it's 4 out of the 5 lines start with the same character. And then 3 out of the 5 lines have these 2 characters repeating after. Here, I had no idea. But then like birth, possessive, birth, possessive, birth, possessive. And then down here again, you have 3 lines in a row that end with after. 2 lines in a row that end with like freedom. And then 2 lines later that again end with after. Is this kind of repetition of the same character and sometimes even in the same place an intentional thing? And if so, what's the goal? Like, what is the motivation? What kind of effect do you think this is supposed to have on the reader of the lyrics or the listener, I suppose?
Okay, let me ask her. Oh, that's very cool, by the way. Wow, this is really cool, man.
新生的世界新生的力量新生的就是一种感叹就是说哇就是一种赞叹就是那种语气词没有特
In this particular example, first of all, she said there wasn't really much of a deliberate intent to have a lot of like the repetition that you mentioned. But the example, the one you had just said, the new birth, it has like the character it's just like an exclamation. It doesn't really have like a meaning. It's just an exclamation, just like a human, response, like And I guess it's just from a poetic standpoint, that's just like a poetic process, of writing, method or to try to evoke a certain kind of feeling. But yeah, that it wasn't completely intentional. This song in particular she just mentioned is actually, it's a 咒语, which means like a curse, right? Well, I should make sure I'm not, because 咒语 is also a curse, but there's also let me 好，我搜一下。
叫什么？
咒语哦，你没事，我用字典吧。
行。
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm not incorrectly translating something.
Yeah, totally.
No problem.
Okay, because 咒语 it can mean a curse, but it's also an incantation or an invocation, like a spell. So that song Prejudice actually, like what you highlighted, some of these things, like the section right above the one right above that. A lot of these, when you're talking about like, you know, reciting like an incantation or a spell or one of these kinds of things, in general, those things have a lot of repetition. So in that example, yeah, there was, you know, some intent behind it because of the idea, the concept behind the lyrics being this kind of spell or curse you're casting. There's going to be lots of repetition. But in other instances, like for example, the newborn world, newborn power, this kind of stuff, there wasn't a direct intention for the repetition. But maybe subconscious. Well, let me ask her if maybe if it's possible there was some subconscious intent.
Yeah, is she surprised to see this?
I'll ask her that as well.
没有刻意，因为曲子你写那个旋律，哒哒哒滴哒哒哒哒哒，旋律我都忘了，不好意思。是什么力量？新生的世界。因为这是跟它的旋律很接近。
So in some instances like this one, the newborn world, sometimes it was in relation to the way the melody sounded. Like if the melody had like a component that had a repetitious, you know, component to it melodically, then sometimes her lyrics would reflect that, you know. So that was also a consideration. And also, you sorry, Wes, you just had asked something, and I said it was a great question, but now I just forgot what it was, so I can ask her again.
Is she surprised to see this much repetition?
你再说一遍 again. 没有，完全都是有规，就是我觉得怎么说呢，完全就是
basically it just she wasn't in direct answer, no, she wasn't like surprised by it, you know. And again, it was just a simple reflection of what she felt the song needed lyrically, you know. If she heard like the melodic line in a certain way, you know, and what she wanted to express from a content standpoint, you know, everything was motivated and driven from like an authentic emotional standpoint, you know, and what she felt would best suit, you know, the song, you know, and the purpose of the song. So yeah, no, there wasn't like she wasn't really surprised by it, or, you know, upon reflection or whatever.
You mentioned earlier that she tries to write poetic lyrics. Does this kind of, I mean, to me, this repetition looks kind of poetic in a sense. Is that a connection I'm making up in my head, or is that in there to some degree?
我没有刻意的要他把它写成什么形式，它的格式像写诗一样。等会儿，它的内容，等我怎么说？Yeah,
there's definitely some subconscious like things behind it, you know, because she has a lot of experience writing poetry. So, you know, and sometimes in poetry there'll be a lot of repetition. So yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, she comes from a perspective of approaching it poetically, you know. So absolutely.
Well, looking further across different songs of your album, it's interesting to see that there's a lot of variation in the amount of lyrics assigned to different songs. So, for example, songs like Euphoria only have 4 characters or words. So you've got 浮生若梦. And Ghost has about 6 lines of lyrics. But if we look at Mountain and Prejudice, they're obviously much longer. So, yeah, how do you decide how many lyrics to put into one song?
首先说星吧，你看星它是一种，首先从这个名字的角度来看，星，然后我理解的就是极乐。
First, we'll talk about the song Euphoria. Basically, the song gave her this kind of feeling of, this kind of like a feeling of floating and a certain kind of positive energy in it. And it was just simply that's actually in Chinese, it's called a chengyu. Chengyu is just like an old expression. And it's one of the hardest parts about learning Chinese. I mean, if you want to be considered like a really, good Chinese speaker, the more chengyu you can say, it's
right.
It's pretty, it gives you like credibility, I guess. But and there's thousands and thousands of them. I think the average Chinese, 你觉得就是一般的中国人会多少个成语？
一般的中国人，
对，大概2000个。
掌握的词汇量也差不多吧，2000左右吧。
Yeah, the average Chinese speaker probably knows about 2,000 of those chengyu. But there's tens of thousands of them, I guess. But anyway, going back to the question, that particular chengyu, or that kind of saying, just kind of came to her naturally, and she thought it best suited the song. So that was the simple reason behind it. And that song actually, obviously, probably most people who listen to the album, is definitely the most experimental song on the album. From a production standpoint and from a compositional standpoint, there's a lot of experimentation going on. From my compositional standpoint, there's a lot of influence from Bjork, whose music I dig, and especially vocally, and lyrically, yeah, she felt that the less lyrics, the better, and that's by far the most repetitious. It's just those four syllables sung over and over. 浮生若梦, yeah, 浮生若梦, and it's just over and over and over, and spliced up and put in different ways, and it's just overlaying one another and everything else.
那山呢，它给我的感觉更多是比较抽象一点的东西，对。然后根据山，我可以写很多，可以描述。
Yeah, and for example, the song Mountain, that song is lyrically, it's more, it's abstract, but yet at the same time, it's kind of directly and related to the mountain, so it has like this imagery to it. And in fact, the song opens with this sound, this like wah, and that's supposed to be the mountain. It's kind of it's kind of being blatant. And in fact, sorry, I go off topic a lot, but that sound, which it's just like a little interesting bit of information, which most people probably don't know. That sound, it's like a drone. It's actually in the whole song from the beginning to the end, and it obviously gets lower in volume, but yeah, it acts as a drone, and it's there the whole time. So, and that is very much in relation to the lyrics, because when I came up with that song title, that was song title I had thought of, because I was having this conversation with somebody, and I remember, coming from my own personal feelings, like I'm just personally, I'm the kind of person who's, when I have to talk about things that are related to like my own feelings and stuff and express them, I'm really bad at it, and at the time I was having a conversation with my now fiance, but I remember we were kind of having a intense conversation about something, and when you're talking about feelings and stuff, and I remember like thinking to myself, well, no matter how hard I try, like I just can't get the words out, and at the moment I remember thinking it feels like a mountain, like there's this enormous, huge mountain, and it's like to get the words out, to say some things like that that you have to talk about, that's like in your deep in your heart or whatever, those kind of emotional things. It felt to me like trying to climb over a mountain, like, and just a huge, like, you know, bigger than Mount Everest, you know what I mean? It just seemed like an insurmountable thing to overcome, you know. It seemed just so that, and immediately that song came to me, and it was written like the same day after I had that conversation, you know. It's like, just feels like, I feel like I'm just trying to come up. So obviously when she wrote the lyrics, and I was kind of the writing force behind that tune, she asked me, you know, well, what are you trying to express here? And I didn't tell her exactly what I just mentioned now. I think later on I had told her, you know, but I just kind of, because for that tune, I didn't want to get in her way, you know, like I didn't want to impose what I wanted lyrically, or, you know, from a lyric, the content of the lyrics. I didn't want to impose anything. I wanted her to just have her own interpretation of it. But I just vaguely said, like, well, it's about kind of trying to overcome something. And in some ways, like a huge mountain is like a symbol for, you know, overcoming difficulty, or, you know, if you can climb it and get over it, it's like, you know, it's a feat, you know, in many ways. So lyrically, that song is pretty long. And she wrote the lyrics with some of that in mind. So like I said, it's like abstract, because the mountain is symbolic of, you know, just overcoming adversity and difficulty. But at the same time, it's also extremely blatant. You know, the song opens with that sound, and it's there from the beginning to the end. And structurally, it's also like, it's kind of the most poppy song on the album. You know, structurally, it's a pop song. It's a verse, it's a chorus, it's a verse, it's a chorus, it's a bridge. It's like a variation of the verse, and then a chorus, and then it's done, you know. And it's like, it's just a pop structure. And the chorus is very melodically is a pop song. I mean, if you took out all the crazy rhythms and all the crazy stuff that's going on, essentially it's just a pop song. But because of the structure of it, so, you know, you had these verses and the choruses, so there's just going to be a lot of lyrics, and there's a lot of melodies, and, you know, overlaying melodic lines, intertwining and stuff like that. So lyrically, they're just going to naturally be more. Also, for these tunes, I can answer that question in a certain way too, because the vocal melodies I pretty much wrote all myself, and they were all written previously to the lyrics. So when I had finished writing the vocal melodies, you know, she just applied her lyrics to them. Okay. So I'm sure that had some influence in how she constructed the, you know, as she had mentioned, you know, like when we were talking about repetition, you know, sometimes the melodic repetition would give her, you know, the idea of using lyrical repetition.
Speaking of like soundscapes, one thing we noticed, if we are interpreting this right, is that in a number of cases, Lynn uses sound symbolism in her lyrics. Like, she sings things that are sounds rather than words. Like on the song Dark, there's, again, butchering the pronunciation here, but dadla for like a bell. And on Ghost, there's pang pang for, which I believe is like a crashing noise. Right. What's kind of the goal of using these sort of onomatopoetic sound symbolism in the lyrics?
我想让它更加的生动。
生动。
生动就是动态有那种感觉。铃儿叮咚叮咚的响。
So in a lot of cases, those what is it called in English? Onomatopoeia. Yeah. In a lot of cases, it was just a means to create a different kind of dynamicism lyrically, you know, where the sounds being sung aren't necessarily, you know, words that reflect a particular meaning, but could evoke, you know, but can still evoke feeling. So, for example, and I didn't even know this until I just asked her that song, the song Ghost, in the beginning, that pung pung, that's actually supposed to represent heartbeat. Okay. I didn't know until just now. And in the song Dark, you know, because the openings sound like this very high pitched, and it's got like a keyboard sound behind it. It's obvious. It's being, again, kind of blatant that it's trying to, and even the lyrics say it, you know, it's a bell, you know, and the sound. So she was just using this kind of ding dong, you know, because that's like a bell. Even everybody in the world uses ding dong. That sound is as a reflection for a bell. And so, yeah, it was just for a different kind of dynamicism and you know, using the voice not only as a way to deliver words that, you know, have meaning, you know, in a literal sense, but also using the voice almost like an instrument or a way to, you know, create a different kind of effect. So yeah, you know, and I remember when we were recording the vocals, a lot of that. Sorry, mosquito. I remember a lot of the times when we were trying stuff, you know, we were conscious about, well, being open to the idea of using the voice not only as a delivery for words, but also using the voice as like an instrument, you know. So in that case, yeah, that's what that was about.
Okay, interesting. So to ask about things that aren't in the lyrics, we wanted to talk about the lack of pronouns in your lyrics. So I think I only saw one instance of pronouns, and that was in one line from Farewell that reads in the English version, staring at you and me. So did you intentionally avoid pronouns in your lyrics?
是代词。
代词就比如说我那个什么就很少。
你的意思是说歌词里面很少有我，别照我这么近嘛，显得我的 face
really good
very big.
She said, "Don't put the." She doesn't want to make her face look too big if I put the phone.
这个是
We're not recording video, so it's
是一种非常大的一种智慧。什么智慧呢？就是我描写这些东西的时候，跟我没有关系。
She when she was writing lyrics, she didn't want.
这怎么起了这么多颗的？
哎呦 she didn't want to. She didn't want the lyrics to be a reflection of her personally that much. She wanted the lyrics to be kind of a 自我脱离，可以这么理解吗？
对 yeah.
Just, you know, she wanted to remove herself from the lyrics in a way, you know, which is kind of an impossible task because there's always going to be some level of, you know, bias or subjectivity. You can't be completely objective, but insofar as you can, you know, as much as you can try, she wanted to do that, you know, lyrically. So you're not going to see like I, you know, there's very little I or whatever, like you mentioned pronouns. So that's basically it. She wanted to write lyrics that basically humanity could all, you know, relate to in some way. Could create some kind of resonance. And so that was kind of the reason behind it, you know. Yeah, basically.
Right.
You mentioned
go ahead.
authenticity earlier. Is it difficult to be authentic when you remove yourself from a piece of art?
没有我，是因为我不想以我的角度去描述一些东西，但是我说的那些东西，它是我的理解。
She said she doesn't feel like there's a contradiction here because she simply wanted to, when she's writing lyrics, to remove herself from the, you know, not having her as the focal point behind what is being written from her perspective. It's more from her, this is what she just said, just from her understanding of things, but, you know, trying to see it from like a outside perspective. So I guess, yeah, it's a little difficult to explain, but she doesn't think that there's like a contradiction in being authentic where you're trying to remove yourself from it in a certain way. And it's more of like an observation, I guess, you know. It's like observing it and coming from an understanding in the most honest way you can understand something, you know what I mean? Which obviously which I guess leaves a lot of room for how you might want to interpret that, you know, which I certainly, you know, don't completely understand myself, but you know, so it goes.
Does that mean that then the perspective that Lynn is singing from is not necessarily like her personal perspective, as you said, because she's trying to kind of remove herself from the lyrics, I suppose, but does that mean that the perspective is more like some kind of like outside narrator?
然后在客观的前提，
怎么客观的？
在客观的前提，首先你要有自己的认知，你要绝对的理性。
Basically, she's saying that it stems from, I mean, it is like she was trying to be as objective as possible, like an observer. And to achieve that objectivity, she said, it has to stem from a certain kind of rationality, the way you understand things from a rational standpoint, and trying to be as close to truth as possible. And she says that's the way you can achieve that. Like when you're keeping like the concept of truth in mind and trying to stay close to it. And try, you know, using reason and rationality.
Okay, interesting.
Moving then to kind of the translations of your lyrics that you have, because as you mentioned, online on your Facebook page, you have these really nice images that have all the song lyrics in Chinese and then translated into English. And you mentioned, I believe, that this is in part to kind of help engagement with overseas audiences. What was the process of translating like? Is that something that you actually did yourself, or was somebody else involved?
Yeah, I was the one in charge. Actually, in the back of my mind, I did want to do the English translation at some point for these lyrics, but I never, you know, had like a concrete plan as to when I was going to do that. But approximately, I don't know, this must have been a few months ago, three or 4 months ago, the label had asked me if I could provide them with a translation for the lyrics, because, you know, they're obviously going to be promoting the record and sending it to different media outlets. And they said it would be helpful if, you know, whoever is reviewing the record or, you know, writing an editorial about it or whatever, you know, if they have a English translation so they can have a better understanding of what's going on. So I said, sure, you know. And so the first thing I did was I just took all the lyrics. I mean, I could translate them, but I was just curious. And I just threw them in Google Translate. And I was just curious what was going to come out. And I was actually surprised. Some came out pretty interesting. You know, because I was a little, you know, nervous about translating the lyrics to English, because it's very difficult, because, you know, there's certain, when you're not translating things that are just direct information, you know, instructions, or, you know, when you're translating things that have metaphor and symbolism and, you know, an artistic element to it, you need to be able to maintain that, but at the same time balance, you know, what Lynn was writing about, and try to maintain a balance of that artistry and poeticism and whatnot. So it was a very interesting task and a challenging one, because I wanted to be as faithful to her original lyrics content as possible, but also at the same time maintaining this kind of element of poeticism to it. And sometimes when I was looking at the Google Translate, some lyrics came out in ways that surprised me, because I had never really studied the lyrics that much prior to that, honestly. Like, because I was more involved with the musical composition and the melodies and the way she sung the stuff. And even when she would ask me like, oh, well, what do you want these lyrics to be about? You know, this is, you know, for example, Mountain, you wrote the song. And like I had mentioned, I wouldn't give her too many details. You know, I wanted to leave it up to her a little bit more. But yeah, some of the lyrics in Google, the way they came out really surprised me. It's sometimes in a good way, you know, because I don't think I ever would have thought I would have came up with myself like how to phrase that way. You know, like the song Mountain, in the beginning, the first verse, like there's something about like, you know, come to me now, my hands are full of strength. I think that was the way Google had translated it. And I remember reading it, I was like, wow, that's really cool. It's got like this kind of like biblical vibe to it, you know, like, but yeah, it was a tough task to complete. And I had to ask her on a few occasions, you know, like what exactly did you mean here? And, you know, and, you know, it's possible somebody could in the future, you know, if somebody wants to go ahead, and I'm totally cool with it, you know, if a native Chinese speaker who also speaks fluent English wants to give it a go, you know, translate the lyrics into English with their own, you know, interpretation, I think it'd be great, you know, because that was just my interpretation of it. And, you know, I did the best I could. I revised it a couple times, you know, after the very first translation, I was reading some of it and I was kind of scratching my own head. I was like, what does this mean? You know, like, and then I revised it a couple times and it seemed to be a little bit more cohesive, but yeah, I think it's a challenging task, and, you know, I did the best I could. And I think they're relatively accurate. But yeah, if somebody wants to ever give it a shot, you know, please go ahead and send us a copy.
When you were revising, were you ever thinking that like you need to make the English sound metal?
No, that thought never even came to my head. And like Lynn said, you know, when it was just pure lyrics, you know, almost like if it's almost like as if there was no music at all. If these were just pure words without any music, you know, it was just like just translate these words in a way that you think has, you know, is something interesting and poetic, but, you know, also maintains the meaning of what she wrote originally. But I was never trying to be anything, no.
Okay. Was there anything that you found especially difficult to translate or transform into English from Mandarin?
Prejudice song I remember being particularly difficult to translate. Yeah, that song for whatever reason I found challenging to translate. Dark was also challenging. Euphoria, because let me check my dictionary, because it means that Fu Sheng Ruo Meng means so this dictionary I have here, it says life is like a fleeting dream, or life is fleeting like a dream.
This fleeting life is like a dream is in my notes. Okay. Does that sound right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. This fleeting life. Thank you. This fleeting life is like a dream, or life is like, yeah. So that's an example of, you know, I'm not a lyricist, but that was an example. Like, it just sounded more poetic to phrase it as this life is like a fleeting dream, instead of life is like a fleeting dream. Life is like a fleeting dream, to me, doesn't sound very poetic. But if you just kind of reverse it, this fleeting life is like a dream, for whatever reason, to me, it just has a little bit more, you know, sense of poeticism to it. So that was just an example of how I approached it. Like, well, I do want it to sound, I could just let it be very, you know, direct, and, you know, just, you know, to hell with the poeticism of it. You know, but I tried my best to maintain it, which wasn't easy. But yeah. And like I said, if anybody ever wants to take a crack at translating it, please feel free.
Were there times, like, it seems in some ways you had a little bit of freedom in what you did? Like, we mentioned the crashing noise that was in one song. I believe that's translated as listen. So moving from the sound to telling somebody to listen to the sound. what was kind of involved in that? Like, was that something that you were kind of hesitant to do, or were you comfortable making those kind of modifications, or did they just kind of happen naturally?
Which song is this?
So on the song Ghost, the pang pang crashing noise there's no like onomatopoeia in the English, but there is just the word listen, which again, I might be misreading it, but I didn't see a character for listen at that point in the song. So I was wondering, like,
you know what, for that particular song, I think I didn't translate the pung pung that. So the lyrics for that song, the I think I started translating from when the lyrics started saying listen, right? Because the listen, I think, is in the lyrics.
Yeah, it's in the next line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Next line, the first word.
Yeah. So I think the translation didn't start until then. But I guess that might be a little misleading. That's a good point. You know, maybe I should have in the English lyrics just included the onomatopoeia as well, just to make it clear, you know. So yeah.
That wasn't, just to be clarified, that wasn't like a gotcha question. I was honestly like, I was curious as to your approach. I wasn't like, hey, you missed this. Like that wasn't my intent.
No. It's good. It's a good. No, I know it's all good. It's a interesting point. You know, it's a consideration. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to wrap up, what would you say is the ultimate role of language and lyrics in O's music, and perhaps in metal more broadly?
我觉得它跟可能大家听的重型音乐的歌词不太一样，跟大家听到的重型歌词不太一样。然后我们的重型歌词里
First of all, the lyrics in this band are, generally speaking, are a lot different. You know, even being a different language aside, being in Chinese aside from the usual English lyrics, generally speaking, are pretty different from most other like so-called heavy bands. But as far as she's concerned, she doesn't think that it's even necessary to consider the fact heavy band, that you're playing heavy music, to have that dictate anything about your lyrics.
Oh wow.
You know, it as far as she's concerned, it's a non-issue. You know, like, you know, lyrics are lyrics. What you want to say, you know, it shouldn't matter. You know, but I mean, if that's important to you, and this is me speaking out, like, that's cool. You know, like, if you know you want to write about, you know, something because this is fucking metal, you know what I mean? That's great, you know. But as far as she's concerned, it's not important. You know?
So what does she feel is the role of lyrics in O's art then? What do lyrics do as part of the complete package? What would be lost if there were no lyrics?
这些歌词在里面，因为是我来唱的，如果没有了它，就没有了灵魂。我觉得它是灵魂，它这个灵魂你看不见。
From her perspective, if there were no lyrics to the music of O, for example, if she just said, she could still have sung the melodies with the same, you know, vocalizations that didn't have the lyrics, but for her, lyrically, it provides a more emotional connection to the music because they're her own lyrics. So she's singing things that she has faith in and that she believes in, and you know, and at the same time there's melody is delivering these lyrics. It just provides another level of depth in terms of emotional connection that she has as a vocalist. So that's the role. It's just another level of depth that she has being the vocalist of the band. You know, if she's singing her lyrics that she believes in and are authentic, yeah, it's just gonna help her bring another level of emotional depth to the performance of the music. So that's basically the role of it, of the lyrics.
Cool.
Great. So, of course, we should thank you very much for participating in this interview. It's been really interesting for us because this is a really different perspective from that which we've featured before on the show. Not just because obviously you're a band based in China, but also because you've got a very different lyrical approach than a lot of other bands we've spoken to. So that's been really great. Thank you for that.
And thank you for your patience and for the live translation. That's
that incredible effort.
Yeah. Sorry for tiring out.
It's my pleasure.
Sure.
Thank you guys for having us.
And we also wanted to ask for our listeners, where's the best place to keep up with all of O's music, tours, performances, everything about the band?
Sure. I think probably the best we have a website, which is theband.com, but that website in its current state is more of just a portal to, you could find our Facebook and our Instagram accounts. Those two are the most kept up to date, on a weekly basis. There will always be updates on those platforms. So yeah, both Facebook and Instagram are the band. If you want to search like the username, it'll come right up. And also the main website, theband.com. It's the Facebook and Instagram links are all on there. So for any updates and about future live performance and any updates at all, they're all kept up to date on Facebook and Instagram.
And you've been updating a lot of like little behind the scenes videos on Facebook too and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, yep. We try to keep it, updated. I was here. We're in our little rehearsal room right now. Every time we get together and rehearse and go over stuff, we're always taking video and just sharing little clips and stuff. So that stuff will always be kept up to date. And we have we're going to be starting recording the second album very soon. It's almost completed. Yeah, it's almost completed compositionally and even lyrically. She's the songs that have that the melodies are all written to. She's already pretty much written the lyrics for. So album 2 is on its way eventually.
Super fast. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this album has been done for a little while. Before we got signed, it was already finished. So even before we released this album, the second album was already in the process of being written. So yeah, we're working away over here, and like there'll always be updates on the Instagram and Facebook.
Very cool.
Great.
Yeah, look forward to it. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, if you guys ever have a chance to come to Beijing, you gotta hit us up and we can hang out.
Yeah,
that'd be
sure.
sick. Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, thank you very much. And if you guys ever tour Australia, let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We hope we have the chance.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. And Lynn, thank you as well. Sorry,
thank you,
can't do say so properly in Chinese, but we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Looking forward to you.
we had fun.
Yeah, wonderful.
Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
再见. Thank you for listening to Lingua Italica. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Before we leave, we just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.